My name is Sue Maynard, and I am 28 years old. I never imagined my life would unravel in the span of a single morning, with nothing more dramatic than a soft phone alarm and my toddler's congested breathing filling the house. For years, I told myself I was lucky, married young to a man who adored me, raising two beautiful kids, pregnant with our third. Tyler and I had been together since I was 19, and he was 22. We'd weathered storms, survived the awkward early 20s struggles, and built a life I believed was solid. Or maybe I just wanted to believe it. Maybe that's the part that hurts the most now. What I didn't know then was that betrayal can bloom quietly, without warning, like mold behind the walls of a house you thought was safe. 2 years ago, my dad, my only parent, was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. He has always been my favorite human. The person whose laugh could pull me out of the darkest places. The one whose bear hugs made every jagged piece inside me settle. When I lost my mom at 12, he became everything. My anchor, my soft landing, my proof that good people still existed in the world. When his doctor told us the treatments had stopped working, everything inside me shifted. The world dimmed. I tried to fight it, to keep my smile bright for my kids, to keep the house clean and dinner warm, to still be the wife who touched Tyler's arm and asked how his day was. I refused to fall apart because my children deserve stability, even if I felt like I was crumbling quietly under the weight of grief. But Tyler, Tyler was my rock, or so I thought. He held my hand through every appointment. He rubbed my back when my dad forgot things. Little things at first, then big things, like the name of the dog he bought me for my 21st birthday. Tyler was steady, attentive, gentle. If there were warning signs, I never saw them. Maybe I didn't want to. Maybe I couldn't afford to. When Dad's prognosis worsened, Tyler urged me to quit my job. "You need time with him," he said. "Let me take care of the rest." It sounded loving. It sounded supportive. It sounded like a man who understood the fragility of what I was losing. A month later, when I still hadn't stepped away from work, I found out I was pregnant again. And Tyler repeated the same words, softer this time, almost pleading. So I quit. I let myself trust him. And with every passing day, I clung to the idea that at least my marriage was safe, even if the rest of my world was falling apart. Jess, my best friend since diapers, was my other anchor. She and I grew up intertwined. Our moms were best friends before us, and we joked we were each other's chosen sisters. Thick as thieves, soulmates in friend form. She held me the day I learned my dad had months left. She let me cry into her shirt until it was soaked. She told me she loved me, that she had me, that she wasn't going anywhere. How poetic that those words would become lies. This morning started like any other. My 3-year-old was sick, so I had been up early with him, wiping his little nose and whispering lullabies while Tyler's work alarm blared from the bedroom. He sleeps through anything, including his alarms, so I walked in to turn them off. He mumbled that he'd been up late working and rolled over, taking the morning off. There was nothing unusual, nothing strange, just my husband, exhausted, the father of my children, the man who held me every night as I cried over losing my dad. But when I reached for his phone to silence the last alarm, a message popped up on the lock screen, from Jess. "I'm assuming since there hasn't been an angry pregnant lady on my doorstep, you haven't told her about us yet." Time stopped. My breath didn't just catch, it abandoned me. My vision tunneled. For a second, I genuinely thought I might faint. I walked out of the room before I even realized I'd moved, Tyler asleep behind me, unaware that everything he'd spent 4 months hiding was unraveling in the dim dawn light. 4 months. 4 months of messages, 4 months of lies I read in cold, clinical silence, while the toddler's humidifier hummed beside me. There were no warning signs, no late-night work sessions, except rare ones, no secret glances between them, no inappropriate touches, nothing. They acted exactly the same as they always had. He was affectionate. She hugged me every time she saw me. They joked like siblings. Sometimes the absence of clues is the biggest clue of all. As I held the phone, scrolling through message after message, I kept thinking, how is this real? How did I miss this? And worse, why? Why now, when my dad is dying? Why, when I need my people the most? I thought I might scream, or shake, or throw something. But instead, my body just folded inward, quiet, empty, numb in a way I wasn't prepared for. I should have marched into the bedroom and confronted him on the spot. I should have driven to Jess's house and screamed until my throat tore, but something inside me whispered, "Not today. Today, you hold the last pieces of your life together. Tomorrow, I will confront him. Tomorrow, I will watch my marriage end. Tomorrow, I will lose the friend I thought I'd grow old with. But today, I need these last 24 hours of peace, the fragile kind, the kind that exists right before a storm destroys the whole coastline." And somewhere deep inside me, beneath the grief and betrayal, a strange seed took root. Something I didn't understand yet. A feeling that Jess's betrayal wasn't just selfish, it was intentional, calculated, and it was only the beginning of a much darker truth. The next morning arrived too quietly. No tension in the air, no cinematic thunderstorm announcing the end of my marriage. Just sunlight through the blinds, the soft rattle of my toddler's cough, and the sound of Tyler humming in the kitchen like he hadn't just detonated the center of my life. I watched him for a long moment from the hallway. The man I loved, the father of my children, the person who had slept beside me for almost a decade. He was pouring cereal, swaying a little, still wearing the t-shirt he'd worn the night before, the one I now knew he also wore when he left my bed to go to hers. I stepped into the kitchen. "Sue, you okay?" he asked, cheerful, oblivious. My voice was barely a whisper. "We need to talk." He blinked. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, guilt, a flash of something darker. And then, for the briefest second, I saw a softness in his face. Grief? Shame? Like he already knew what was coming and had been rehearsing his reaction in secret. "About what?" he asked, but his voice cracked. I placed his phone on the counter between us. He went pale instantly, color draining, breathing stuttering, body freezing in place. He didn't even reach for the phone. He didn't need to. His guilt walked into the room with him. "I can explain," he started. "No," I cut him off gently. "You can talk, but you can't explain." Something inside him broke apart. He wasn't angry at first, just panicked, shaking, whispering apologies, stumbling over sentences that made no sense. "She needed me," he blurted at one point, his voice raw. "Jess, she wasn't okay. You don't understand." And there it was. The first hint that whatever Jess had dragged him into wasn't some reckless fling born of lust. There was desperation behind it, something tangled, something I would not understand until much later. I felt sick. "I'm leaving," I said finally. "Me and the kids." He snapped then, fear turning to fury. "You can't take my kids from me. You don't get to decide that." But his voice wasn't anger. It was panic laced with something feral, something unstable. I didn't engage. The pieces were falling too fast. I packed what I could that day. Clothes, diapers, important documents, keepsakes my dad had given me, a few toys the kids loved. Most of the house could burn, and I wouldn't have blinked. My next stop was my OB-GYN. Sitting in that exam room, belly round, with a child made from a man who had been sleeping in another woman's bed, was a pain I never imagined I'd feel. The nurse held my hand when I told her why I needed a full STD panel. The doctor hugged me when she walked in. I cried quietly for the first time since the discovery. Not because of the betrayal, but because for the first time I was terrified for my unborn baby. After the appointment, I drove to my lawyer's office. She greeted me with calm professionalism, the kind that felt like a lifeline. I dumped every document I had onto her desk. Bank statements, wills, insurance papers, the kids' financial plans, even my parents' old legal documents. She flipped through them, brows pulling together the longer she read. "Sue, did you know Tyler recently applied for 2 new credit lines?" My stomach dropped. "No. And he moved funds between accounts you weren't listed on, not illegally, but unusual." I swallowed hard. What had he been planning? What had Jess been planning with him? My lawyer made notes. Many notes. She asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. She didn't rush me, didn't push me, just built a wall around me brick by brick, piece by piece. By the time I left her office, she told me, 30 days, I'll have the papers ready. Then came the sit down at Angie's house. Jess's parents, Ruth and Joe, Tyler's parents, everyone who had once been intertwined in my life like woven roots. Angie had prepared a slideshow, a literal slideshow of their text messages. The room went silent except for the clicking of the remote and the occasional gasp. Tyler lunged at Jess at one point, something primitive and unhinged in him, and Joe had to hold him back. Jess collapsed into sobs. begging her parents to forgive her, saying she didn't mean for things to go this far. Bob looked her dead in the eye. "You stopped being my daughter the day you decided to destroy a family." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the little girl I grew up with, terrified, shaking, lost. It didn't excuse anything, but it reminded me that the wreckage wasn't mine alone. When the meeting ended, Tyler went home. I saw it through the Ring camera hours later, him walking into our house, seeing the empty spaces where our things used to be, and losing control, screaming, throwing things, punching walls, breaking furniture. Not the man I knew, or maybe exactly the man I had ignored signs about. The police showed up after a neighbor called. He was arrested. His parents refused to bail him out. Meanwhile, my dad's cabin became our refuge. I packed quietly, moved quietly, survived quietly. In therapy, I finally let myself cry. My therapist sat beside me, not across from me, and told me this version of grief, the compounded loss of a father, a marriage, a best friend, was enough to drown anyone. But she told me something else too. "You're not drowning. You're navigating. You're still steering the ship." Her words anchored me. I clung to that. But as I fell asleep that night at my dad's cabin, my children breathing softly beside me, my phone kept lighting up on the nightstand. Tyler, Tyler, Tyler again. Threats, begging, confusion, denial, blame. And finally, something that sent a chill down my spine. Jess wasn't the only one. I stared at that message long after the screen dimmed, my pulse cold and heavy in my throat. It was the first moment I realized this betrayal was deeper than I thought, and neither Tyler nor Jess had told me the whole truth. If grief had a sound, it would be the quiet that filled my father's cabin the week he died. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of something sacred unraveling. Every morning, I sat by his bedside, holding his hand, pretending we still had time. Some days he remembered me. Some days he thought I was my mother, come back to guide him home. And some days he was simply gone, staring past me at things I couldn't see. But the morning he passed, he woke lucid. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Sue," he whispered, voice thin as paper, "don't let your heart get small." He'd given me advice my entire life. How to fix a sink, how to ride out mourning, how to breathe through fear. But that sentence was different. I didn't understand it then. I would much later. He also pressed his wristwatch into my palm. His old one, scratched around the edges from decades of use. "For when you're ready," he said, "you'll know." Those were his last clear words. He died with the sunrise. I broke quietly, the way glass breaks under heat, not crashing, not shattering, just fracturing from the inside. My children climbed into my lap when I couldn't stand anymore, and their tiny arms anchored me to the earth. The next days were a blur. Arrangements, condolences, casseroles, sleep that came in jagged fragments. Through all of it, Jake was there, Jess's brother, who had always been gentle with his strength and soft with his anger. He handled errands, drove me when I couldn't drive myself, sat on the porch with me for hours without saying a word. Sometimes that's the only kind of kindness grief can tolerate. My marriage ended quietly after that. Tyler, fresh out of jail and clearly terrified by the weight of what he'd caused, became unusually compliant. My lawyer switched strategy to dissolution instead of divorce, and the process accelerated. He signed what she asked him to. Didn't fight custody arrangements. Didn't show up to mediation. It was as if he wanted out too, as if Jess had taken something from him that he couldn't get back. My therapist suggested that grief can make some people unrecognizable. Others, it reveals. I wasn't sure which category Tyler fell into. When the final papers came through, I didn't feel freedom. I felt numb. Then I felt sick. Then I felt relief. A strange, light, terrifying relief. The baby came early, small, perfect, and feistier than I expected for how tiny he was. I named him after my father. It felt like the only right thing in a world where everything else had turned upside down. Angie was the one who held my hand as I delivered him, crying soft tears that dripped onto my shoulder. She'd been my mother in more ways than my own mother ever had the chance to be. Seeing her there, steady, warm, determined to protect me, even while grieving her own daughter, it broke something open in me. Mother-in-law stayed with my older children. They visited later, tiptoeing around the hospital bed, whispering, "Hi, baby brother," like they were greeting a sleeping king. Jake brought food that he knew I wouldn't eat, but brought anyway. "For when you can stomach it," he said, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear in a way that felt too intimate, then stepped back immediately, as if punishing himself for comforting me too much. He held the baby once, reluctantly, arms stiff like he was holding something made of glass. But the baby curled his tiny fingers around Jake's thumb, and something warm flickered across his face. Something he hid quickly, blinking it away as if it were a betrayal to feel anything joyful in the aftermath of what Jess had done. After I came home, the peace didn't last long. Jess shattered it. It started with emails, dozens sent in minutes, then hacking my social media, posting lies, then calling my workplace with fabricated stories. I was suspended for a week while they investigated. It was humiliating, terrifying. My therapist said Jess was unraveling. Angie tearfully agreed. Her daughter had always been intense, but never obsessive. One afternoon, while Jake was in the backyard with the kids and I was chopping vegetables for dinner, my front door opened. Not knocked, not rang. Opened. I turned, knife still in hand. Jess stood in the doorway, eyes hollow and pupils blown wide, as if something inside her had cracked completely. "We need to talk," she said. "No," I answered. "You need to leave." Her face twisted. "You can't act like you're the victim. I saved you." "By sleeping with my husband?" "You were trapped," she said, tears streaking her cheeks. "He didn't love you anymore. He told me. He told me everything. I helped you. Why aren't you grateful?" I didn't have time to respond. Jake burst inside, having heard her scream. He grabbed her arms, not hurting her, but holding her back, while she thrashed and clawed like a wild animal. "You're ruining everything," she screeched. "You already did," I whispered. She was escorted out. The police took her. Cameras captured the whole event. That night, I filed for an emergency restraining order, for me and all 3 children. It was granted immediately. I thought that would bring peace. But if trauma has taught me anything, it's that peace rarely comes cleanly. Tyler vanished next. No visits, no calls, no interest in the baby. Months passed, and he never reached out, not even to his parents. Rumors trickled through, that he'd remarried, that he'd washed his hands of fatherhood entirely. My children adjusted with stunning resilience, too much resilience. At dinner one night, my oldest leaned close to Jake, resting her head on his arm. "Can you be my dad?" she whispered. "My real one doesn't like playing with us." Jake froze, eyes filling, but he didn't answer. Later, he asked if he could attend therapy sessions with me, so I can learn how not to mess this up. He meant us. He meant the beginnings of something neither of us were ready to name. The baby started calling him Dada. Jake cried quietly in the hallway the first time he heard it. Through all of this, I kept wearing my father's watch in the drawer, untouched. I wasn't ready, not yet. But the pieces were shifting, a new rhythm forming, a new possibility rising in the ashes of everything I'd lost. And somewhere, in the deepest part of my heart, my father's words were beginning to echo. "Don't let your heart get small." Grief has a strange way of circling back when you think you've finally outrun it. I'd built a fragile new rhythm. Therapy sessions, school drop-offs, night feedings, Jake slowly becoming part of our daily gravity when the news arrived like a blow to the ribs. Jess was dead. A drug overdose, alone in her apartment. I froze when I got the call. Not because I was shocked by her unraveling, she'd been spiraling for months, but because Jess had always been the girl who refused so much as a sip of beer at parties, the girl who lectured me in college when I smoked weed, the girl who once burst into tears because she thought she disappointed her mother by failing a math quiz. How does a person fall that far from who they were? Angie told me quietly, her voice shaking with the tremor of a mother who has run out of tears, but not love. She said Jess left letters, multiple. One for her parents, one for Jake, and one for me. It was Jake who brought mine to the house. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't speak when he handed it to me. He just sat beside me on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if waiting for permission to breathe again. I opened it slowly. Jess's handwriting was unmistakable. Looped letters, hearts on her eyes, overly dramatic swoops she'd never grown out of. The first line broke something in me. "I know you won't forgive me, but I need you to understand why." What followed was not an apology. It was a confession, twisted but heartbreakingly transparent. She wrote that she saw me shrinking in my marriage, that she believed I was trapped, that Tyler told her I wasn't in love with him anymore, lies he fed her to justify his own weakness. And then she wrote something that made my skin crawl. "I thought if I removed him the only way I knew how, you'd finally be free." Removed him. As in, destroyed the marriage. She didn't mean to fall in love with him, she said. But she did. And once she fell, she became furious that he always went home to me. The drugs were mentioned at the end. A spiral born of shame, self-hatred, and a lifetime of insecurity stitched under her skin. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there holding the letter, feeling the weight of two truths pressing against each other. She ruined my life. She was hurting beyond anything I understood. Jake still hadn't spoken. When I finally looked at him, I saw tears he was desperately trying to hide. His sister, his only sibling, had torched every bridge and then died in the ashes. He whispered, "I didn't want her dead, Sue. I was angry, but I didn't want her gone." I reached for his hand. For the first time, I was the one steadying him. Grief doesn't care about fairness. It just demands witnesses. The aftermath rippled through everyone. Angie retreated into her home. She still saw my kids once a week, saying being near them soothed her in ways nothing else could. But her eyes were hollow, and sometimes she stared at my youngest as if he were a reminder of everything she gained and everything she lost. Bob was colder. "I lost my daughter years ago," he told me quietly, "but I'm angry she didn't give herself a chance to come back." Jake moved out of his parents' home after a month and started splitting his time between their house and mine. Not officially, not romantically, just present, anchoring, fixing things around the house, playing soccer with the kids, taking the baby when he fussed. He was grieving too, but he refused to let his grief become someone else's burden. Life began settling again, not easily, but steadily. My kids grew more attached to Jake. My oldest started calling him Dad unprompted. Jake froze the first time, tears instantly filling his eyes. That night, he told me he didn't want to take something that isn't mine. But I told him gently, "You're giving them what their father won't." He nodded, but I could tell the moment carved something into him permanently. A few weeks later, while the kids slept and we were cleaning up the living room, Jake cleared his throat. "I've loved you for a long time," he said quietly, "longer than I should admit." My heart stuttered because I remembered it too. Teenage years full of looks we ignored, moments that were too intimate to speak about, and timing that was always wrong. He continued, "I know you're healing. I know this is complicated, but I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere." I said nothing at first, not because I didn't care, but because caring felt dangerous. He didn't push, he never did. Then, 2 weeks after Jess's funeral, he asked me a question that nearly brought me to my knees. "Sue, would you ever consider marrying me someday?" I stared at him, stunned. My heart felt too tight, too sore, too full. "I'm not saying now," he added quickly. "God, not now. But someday, when the dust settles, when you're ready, I've wanted this since we were kids. I just want you to know that's where my heart is." I told him gently that I couldn't answer yet, that I needed him to sit with that desire and make sure it wasn't being shaped by grief. He nodded, respecting me the way Tyler never did. A month later, after things calmed, he asked again, with no fanfare, no ring yet, no audience, just sincerity, quiet and sure. "I still want that future with you, Sue." This time I didn't hesitate. "Then yes," I whispered, "someday." We agreed on a long engagement. Time to breathe, time to heal, time to rebuild something not out of loss, but out of choice. And for the first time since my world fell apart, the future didn't feel like something terrifying. It felt like something I could walk toward with my heart unshrinking, exactly the way my father asked me to. The strange thing about healing is that it doesn't feel like a sunrise. It feels like tiny cracks of light leaking into places you didn't realize had gone dark. Days blur together, school drop-offs, work shifts, therapy appointments, until suddenly you realize you're not bracing for disaster every time the phone rings or someone knocks on the door. Jake moved in quietly, without ceremony. One box at a time, one drawer, one toothbrush beside mine. It wasn't a sudden shift. It was natural, like the spaces of our lives had been waiting for each other. He still asked before doing small things, "Is it okay if I rearrange the tools in the shed?" Or, "Do you mind if I start dinner tonight?" As if afraid of stepping too deeply into a role he wanted more than anything but didn't feel entitled to. The kids didn't hesitate the way we did. They ran to him every morning, crawled into his lap during movies, tugged on his hand when they wanted to show him their drawings or dance routines. My oldest, with her quiet wisdom far beyond her years, went from calling him Uncle Jake to Dad without ceremony. One day it just slipped out. "Dad, look at this picture." And Jake froze, eyes welling instantly. Later that night he whispered, "Are you okay with that?" I thought about it. really thought about it. He's the one showing up, I said softly. Kids know who's safe. He nodded, touched but hesitant, as if afraid to fully step into a title that had been abandoned by someone else. Tyler, meanwhile, remained a ghost. Not a whisper, not a message, not even a request for visitation. My mother-in-law and father-in-law, still grandma and grandpa to the kids, tried reaching him, only to be met with silence. Eventually, they told me he'd remarried and had another child on the way. I felt nothing. Not anger, not longing, just a hollow neutrality, as though he belonged to a different lifetime entirely. One I no longer claimed. The kids thrived. My oldest joined indoor soccer, and Jake volunteered to coach. My middle child rediscovered his laughter. The baby learned to crawl across the living room while Jake cheered louder than anyone. There was peace in the house now, real peace, the kind that doesn't buzz with anxiety beneath the surface. Sometimes I would stand in the hallway and just listen to the sound of Jake playing with the kids, or the baby babbling dada while tugging at his pant leg, and it felt like watching sunlight pour into a room I once thought would always be dim. Yet even in peace, grief lived beside me. I went back to work. Nursing demanded focus, structure, purpose, and routine helped tether me. But some nights when the baby was asleep and the house was finally still, I would go into my father's old office. The room still smelled faintly like his cologne and pine wood. I'd sit at his desk, pressing my hand over the watch he'd given me, still tucked safely into a drawer I hadn't opened since the day he died. Jake found me there once. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though tears blurred my vision. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't tell me to move on. He just knelt beside me, resting a hand over mine. His presence spoke more than words ever could. Months passed, and the rhythm held. The restraining order against Jess remained in place, though there hadn't been a whisper of her shadow since her death. My attorney told me it would legally expire in 7 years, but emotionally, I wondered if her ghost would linger longer. Still, life pressed forward. My therapist kept reminding me, healing isn't linear, it's a dance. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, allow the steps. I tried. I allowed the joy. I allowed the grief. I allowed the fear when it came. I allowed the love when it surprised me. And love did surprise me, slowly, gently, until one day I realized I wasn't living in survival mode anymore. I was simply living. One Saturday morning, Jake was in the backyard with the kids, all 3 of them shrieking with laughter as he pretended to be a giant monster chasing them around. I watched from the sliding door, coffee warm in my hand, heart impossibly full. That was the moment I finally opened my father's watch. The leather band was worn, the face scratched, but it still ticked steadily, faithfully, unbothered by the years it had traveled. I traced the edge with my thumb and understood what he'd meant. He was passing forward time, permission, a reminder that even broken things keep moving. I fastened it onto my wrist. Later that night, after the kids were asleep and the house hummed in that soft, serene way only a safe home does, I told Jake, "I'm ready to start thinking about our wedding." He didn't react dramatically. He didn't shout or cry or gasp. He just pulled me into his arms and pressed a long, quiet kiss to my forehead. "We'll take it slow," he murmured. "We'll make it ours." We didn't pick a date, didn't choose colors or venues. We just allowed the idea to exist, real, gentle, patient. Days later, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A thin, unmarked envelope addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. No return address, no clue of who sent it. For a long moment, I just stared at it, not afraid, just aware that life, even when healing, still leaves threads untied, still leaves stories unfinished, still leaves shadows waiting at the edges. I placed the envelope on my father's watch box without opening it. Not yet. Some truths could wait. For now, the light in my home, Jake's laughter, my children's joy, the steady rhythm of a future rebuilding itself, was enough. More than enough.